Ever since I was a child, I have always dreamed of visiting Europe. I decided to begin my adventure in Madrid and was especially excited to find a hostel in the Malasaña neighborhood, famous for its vibrant history and nightlife. The hostel was situated in an old building in the city center. The reception was cozy when I arrived, but I noticed the staff seemed a bit distant. "Welcome to Madrid. First time here?" the receptionist asked as she checked my reservation. "Yes, I'm very excited to explore the city," I replied with a smile. I went up to my room, located on one of the upper floors. The elevator was out of service, so I took the stairs. As I climbed, I felt a strange sense of unease, as if something in the building was watching me. It must be the excitement of the trip, I thought to myself, trying to shake off the feeling as I entered my room. After leaving my things in the room, I decided to explore the neighborhood. The streets of Malasaña were full of life, with bars, cafes, and vintage shops on every corner. I had dinner at a small local restaurant, enjoying the lively atmosphere. I returned to the hostel late, feeling worn out but happy. As I climbed the stairs to my room, I heard faint whispers that seemed to come from the walls. At first I thought they were other guests, but when I reached my door, the whispers became clearer. "Is someone there?" I murmured, feeling a bit silly. There was no response, but the whispers continued, full of despair. I entered my room and noticed it was very cold, despite the warm weather outside. I turned on the heater, but it didn't seem to make a difference. I decided to go to bed and try to sleep, though the unsettling atmosphere made me nervous. In the middle of the night, I suddenly woke up with my heart racing. I felt like someone was watching me. I opened my eyes and saw a dark figure at the foot of my bed. "Who are you?" I shouted. But when I blinked, the figure disappeared. I stayed awake the rest of the night, unable to shake the feeling that something sinister inhabited that place. The next day, I woke up with sunlight streaming through the curtains. I tried to shake off the unease of the previous night and prepared for a day of exploration. When I went down to the reception to get some coffee, I noticed the hostel was surprisingly empty. I only saw a couple of other guests, which seemed strange given Malasaña's popularity. "Is it normal for it to be so quiet around here?" As I served myself a cup of coffee, I asked the receptionist. "It's the off-season, so there aren't many guests," she replied with a tense smile. Something in her gaze told me there was more behind that explanation, but I decided not to inquire further for the moment. I returned to my room and noticed that my roommate, a foreigner who had arrived the previous night, was not there. Despite his perfectly made bed and intact belongings, it appeared he had not spent the night there. Maybe he went out early, I thought, though the complete absence of signs of life made me a bit nervous. I decided to leave the matter aside and continue with my day. I spent most of the day exploring Madrid, marveling at the architecture and history of the city. I visited museums, walked through the streets of the literary quarter, and enjoyed a delicious lunch at an outdoor cafe. However, the unease from the previous night continued to linger in my mind. I felt watched, followed by shadows that I couldn't explain. After returning to the hostel at dusk, the emptiness was greater. The building, which had seemed charming during the day, now felt oppressive and somber. I slowly climbed the stairs, listening carefully for any unusual sounds. When I reached my room, I found a note on my roommate's bed that said, "Carlos, I'll be back late. Don't wait up." I didn't know any Carlos, which made the note even more disturbing. That night, as I tried to sleep, the persistent cold returned to the room. I huddled under the blankets, but the fear from the previous night was still present. Just as I was starting to drift off, I heard a whisper in my ear, "Help me." Jumping up, I searched for the sound source, but found nothing. Suddenly, the closet door slowly creaked open, revealing a dark figure inside. The figure lunged at me with terrifying speed, and in the blink of an eye, it vanished, leaving the closet door gently swinging. After the encounter with the dark figure, I stayed awake for the rest of the night, unable to fall back asleep. At dawn, I decided I couldn't stay in that room any longer without understanding what was happening. I left the hostel in search of answers, hoping to find someone who could help me explain what I had seen. The hostel was surprisingly empty. I didn't find anyone in the hallways or at reception. As I walked through the dark corridors, I noticed an old mirror hanging on one of the walls. Dust covered the mirror's surface, giving the impression that no one had cleaned it in years. I approached to get a better look, and as I wiped away some of the dust, I saw a figure behind me in the reflection. I turned around quickly, but there was no one there. I looked back at the mirror, and this time, the figure was closer, with an expression of pain and suffering on its face. My heart raced as I tried to look away, but something in the mirror drew me in. It was then that I heard a whisper, "You're trapped here, just like us." Fear took hold of me, and I felt as if the mirror was sucking me into another dimension. Just when I felt I was about to lose control, the mirror shattered into 1,000 pieces. I fell to the floor, gasping and covered in cold sweat. The shards of glass reflected small shadows that moved on their own, and the persistent whispers turned into deafening screams. I got up and ran back to my room, feeling the dark presence of the hostel chasing me every step of the way. That night, I locked myself in my room, trembling with fear. I knew the hostel was haunted, and there were dark forces I didn't understand. I tried to call someone for help, but my phone had no signal. I felt completely isolated and trapped in a place that fed on my fear. I decided to stay awake and watch for any paranormal activity. At midnight, the room's temperature dropped even more. I started hearing slow, heavy footsteps outside the door. I cautiously approached and looked through the peephole, but saw nothing. Suddenly, the footsteps stopped, and someone began pounding on the door with inhuman force. "Who's there?" I shouted, but there was no response. Only the constant pounding seemed to resonate in my bones. The pounding suddenly stopped, and I heard a child's laughter behind me. I quickly turned around and saw the boy I had seen in the mirror standing next to my bed. His face was pale, and his eyes were two dark, empty pits. "Play with me," he said, in a voice that didn't seem to belong in this world. Before I could react, the boy disappeared, and all the lights in the room went out. The complete darkness left me with a sense of impending doom. The absolute darkness in the room enveloped me, and every passing second intensified the terror. My phone was completely dead, and I had no way to call for help. With fear growing inside me, I knelt by the bed and began to pray, trying to stay calm. The shadows seemed to move around me, and every whisper felt closer and more threatening. Suddenly, the door to the room opened, and a blinding light filled the space. My roommate, the foreigner, had returned with a flashlight in hand. "What's going on here?" I asked him, my voice trembling with fear. He looked at me with confusion and replied, "I didn't hear anything unusual. I always stay at this hostel when I come to the city, and I've never had any problems." His response left me perplexed and even uneasy. How was it possible that he hadn't heard anything? I told him about the whispers, the dark figures, and the mirror experience, but he just shook his head. "You must be imagining things," he said, though his expression reflected a hint of doubt. Despite his skepticism, I felt somewhat relieved not to be alone at that moment. The next morning, I woke up and noticed my roommate was gone. He had made his bed perfectly, and his belongings had vanished. Panic washed over me, and I ran out of the room, determined to leave the hostel. As I walked through the hallways, I didn't see anyone else. The building was completely empty, and a sepulchral silence filled everything. I reached the front door, and with trembling hands, tried to open it. To my relief, the door gave way. and I stepped out onto the street, breathing deeply in the fresh air. I ran through the streets of Malasaña, looking for help. I knocked on several doors, but no one answered. Finally, I found a small church, and, in an act of desperation, took refuge there. A priest found me, exhausted and terrified, and led me inside. I told him everything that had happened, and he looked at me seriously. "This place has a dark history," he said. "We will need more than faith to face what follows you." The priest's words filled me with a mix of hope and fear. I knew my experience at the hostel had marked me forever, and the struggle against the shadows chasing me was just beginning. Seeing my state of terror, the priest suggested we return to the hostel to collect my belongings. Although the idea filled me with dread, I knew I couldn't leave my things behind. Reluctantly, I accepted his offer, and together we headed back to the hostel. Every step toward that cursed place felt heavier, as if a dark force was trying to stop me. When we arrived at the hostel, the priest accompanied me as we silently climbed the stairs. The building, which had been the scene of so many horrors, was surprisingly calm. Upon entering my room, everything was in order. There were no signs of the dark presence that had terrorized me the previous night. I quickly gathered my belongings, not wanting to spend more time there than necessary. We spoke with the receptionist, who seemed unaware of what had happened. We checked out, and with immense fear, I left the hostel. I decided I couldn't stay in the city any longer, and moved up my flight back to New York. During the flight, I tried to calm myself, but the experience had left a lasting mark. Each passing day, I feared any shadow I saw on the street, constantly reminding me of what I had experienced in that cursed hostel. During the last days of my trip, I began to notice shadows that seemed to follow me through the Gothic quarter. Indistinct figures seemed to watch me from the shadows at every corner and dark alley. Constant pursuit heightened my anxiety and paranoia. I couldn't wait to return to New York, hoping that distance would free me from this horror. During the flight back, I tried to sleep to escape the exhaustion, but even in my dreams, the woman and child gave me no peace. I woke up sweating and with a racing heart, reliving the pursuit over and over. The sense of desperation accompanied me throughout the journey, and I knew I couldn't face this alone. Once in New York, I sought help from a well-known psychic in my city for her ability to deal with the paranormal. She performed a ritual for me using candles, herbs, and ancient prayers. Despite the significant decrease in the sense of pursuit, the shadows continued to resurface as sporadic nightmares. The experience in Madrid left an indelible mark on my life, reminding me that some forces are more powerful than we can understand.
I really hope you like this scary tale. I would be interested in hearing your opinions or experiences if you have any similar ones. Please remember to hit the bell symbol, like the video, and subscribe to the channel if you find it entertaining so you don't miss any more stories. Traveling to Spain had always been a dream for me and my best friend, Jason. Finally, after months of planning and saving, we flew from New York to Barcelona's airport. The excitement of exploring a new city and discovering its secrets filled us with energy. We decided to stay in a small hotel near the beach, a perfect place to relax and enjoy the sea. The first day was a mix of emotions and discoveries. We walked through the narrow streets of the Gothic quarter, marveling at the ancient architecture and vibrant atmosphere. We spent the afternoon on the beach, enjoying the sun and sea breeze. Everything seemed perfect, as if nothing could ruin our experience. That night, after dining at a small local restaurant, we decided to walk along the beach. The moon shone brightly, reflecting off the gentle Mediterranean waves. There weren't many people around, just a few couples walking hand in hand and groups of friends chatting on the sand. We sat near the shore, letting the sound of the sea relax us. While we were discussing plans for the coming days, we noticed a woman walking alone on the beach. She wore a long, flowing dress that moved with the breeze and seemed to be whispering something in a language we couldn't understand. What caught our attention the most was the small child walking beside her, stumbling slightly on the sand. The woman and child passed close to us, and I could see her face clearly. She was incredibly beautiful, with fine features and eyes that reflected the moonlight. Although we didn't understand what she was saying, her voice had a melancholic tone that gave us goosebumps. Jason and I exchanged glances, both feeling an inexplicable unease. As they walked away, the woman headed towards a rocky area. We were concerned about the child's safety as he struggled to walk steadily. Jason suggested we go warn her about the danger, but something in the air made us hesitate. We decided to watch from a distance, not knowing we were about to witness something that would change our perception of reality forever. While we watched from a distance, the woman and child began climbing the rocks. Jason and I exchanged worried looks, aware of the danger that rough terrain posed for such a small child. Suddenly, a piercing scream shattered the night's tranquility. The woman was screaming frantically, looking out at the dark sea. Without thinking twice, Jason and I ran towards them. By the time we arrived, the woman was already in the water, frantically searching for her child. Although we didn't understand her language, it was clear the child had fallen into the sea. We joined the search, battling the waves as we tried to find the boy in the growing darkness. The noise and our shouts alerted other nearby people. Soon, the beach was filled with onlookers and helpers. The police and authorities arrived quickly, but despite everyone's efforts, we couldn't find the child, and the woman disappeared into the crowd. We spent hours searching for the child and woman, but found neither. The police interrogated everyone present, including Jason and me. We explained what we had seen, but the situation only grew stranger. No one could understand how the woman and child had disappeared so suddenly. The next day, we continued exploring Barcelona, but the previous night's incident lingered in our minds. Every time we passed by the beach, we felt a sense of unease. Jason began to question if we had really seen what we thought we saw. Could it have been a collective hallucination? But we both knew what we had witnessed was real. As days passed, the story of the missing child became a rumor among the locals. Some claimed to have seen the woman walking along the beach on the darkest nights, eternally searching for her lost child. Jason and I chose not to discuss the matter further, yet a nagging doubt and fear crept into our hearts. As the weeks went by, the story of the missing woman and child began gaining media attention. Local TV shows and news reports covered the mystery, describing the woman as a ghostly figure often seen on the beach. News soon revealed that the woman and child had died years ago in a tragic sea accident. The discovery that others had also seen the woman and child intensified the paranormal investigations. Their desperate cries drew these witnesses, and when they attempted to help, the waves dragged them away, vanishing without a trace. The police started taking the story seriously, as there were cases of people who had mysteriously died under similar circumstances. Public interest in the case grew, attracting paranormal investigators from all over. Jason and I followed each new revelation with growing unease. Barcelona Beach became a hotspot for paranormal activity, and every night, more people came hoping to see the woman and solve the mystery. The atmosphere on the beach grew increasingly tense and charged with dark energy. One night, Jason and I decided to return to the beach. Curiosity drove us to seek answers, wanting to understand the mystery that had surrounded us since our arrival. Under the moonlight, we walked in silence, listening to the gentle waves breaking on the shore. At first, we saw nothing unusual, just the empty beach and the shadows cast by the moon. Suddenly, as we approached the rocks, we saw the woman and the child. They were there, as always, walking slowly by the water. We decided to approach cautiously, our hearts pounding in our chests. When we were close enough, we heard a soft, anguished voice saying, "Help me, please." We froze, unable to move or respond. The voice changed tone, becoming more urgent and threatening. "If you don't help me, you'll be the next ones trapped on this beach," it said. A chill ran down my spine, and I saw the fear reflected in Jason's eyes. We knew we were up against something much stronger and scarier. The woman's presence and her warning left us in a state of silent panic, unable to decide what to do next. Fear kept us frozen for a few seconds, but the sense of imminent danger made us react. Jason and I began to slowly back away, not taking our eyes off the woman and child. Suddenly, the woman took a step toward us, and her eyes turned a deep red, filled with fury and desperation. We felt an indescribable panic and started running without looking back. As we fled, we heard the rapid footsteps behind us and the sound of a child's laughter chilling our blood. I glanced back briefly and saw the child running toward us with inhuman speed, his face distorted by a macabre smile. The woman also followed us, her dress floating unnaturally as she glided over the sand. The beach, which once seemed like a place of peace, had transformed into a nightmare. The shadows seemed to come to life, and each time we thought we had escaped, the woman's figure appeared closer. We felt trapped in an endless pursuit by forces we didn't understand, with no way out. Desperate, we headed towards a more rocky area, hoping the rough terrain would give us an advantage. However, as we climbed, the child's screams and laughter echoed closer. When we reached the top, we found ourselves face to face with the woman. Hatred contorted her face, and her red eyes seemed to pierce our souls. "Why didn't you help me?" she screamed with a voice that resonated in our minds, filling us with paralyzing fear. Jason stumbled and fell, and at that moment, the child lunged at him, trying to drag him towards the edge of the rocks. With all my strength, I managed to push the child away and help Jason up. The woman advanced towards us, extending her hands with sharp claws. There was no escape. Despair and terror enveloped us as the woman and child cornered us. It was then that I remembered the locals' words about how the woman sought vengeance and trapped those who didn't help her. We felt our end was near, surrounded by darkness and the relentless cold of the sea. Every passing second increased our desperation, knowing there was no way to escape the horror chasing us. Just when we thought we had lost everything, a bright light momentarily blinded us. A night patrol had arrived at the beach, shining their flashlights everywhere. The guards discovered us crawling on the sand, with marks of struggle all over our bodies and torn clothes. Desperation and relief mixed in our hearts as we tried to explain what had happened. Between gasps and sobs, we recounted our experience, describing the woman and child who had chased us. The guards, although surprised by our state, didn't seem to give much importance to our story. They looked at us skeptically, suggesting that maybe we had drunk too much and what we saw was just a product of our imagination. Despite their doubts, they helped us up and escorted us back to the hotel. Jason and I were exhausted and filled with fear, knowing that what we had experienced was real. The marks on our bodies were proof enough for us, even if no one else believed us. The experience left us with a feeling of vulnerability and terror that wouldn't go away. In the last days of our trip, we began to notice shadows that seemed to follow us through the Gothic quarter. Indistinct figures seemed to watch us from the shadows at every corner and dark alley. Constant pursuit heightened our anxiety and paranoia. We couldn't wait to return to New York, hoping that distance would free us from this horror. During the flight back, we tried to sleep to escape the exhaustion, but even in our dreams, the woman and child gave us no peace. We woke up sweating and racing hearts, reliving the pursuit over and over again. The sense of desperation accompanied us throughout the journey, and we knew we couldn't face this alone. Once in New York, we sought help from a well-known psychic in our city because of her abilities in dealing with the paranormal. She performed a ritual for us using candles, herbs, and ancient prayers. Although the feeling of being pursued diminished considerably, the shadows still appeared as occasional nightmares. The experience in Barcelona left an indelible mark on our lives, reminding us that some forces are more powerful than we can understand.
I really hope you liked this tale. I am thrilled to share these stories with you. Share this video with others so that we can keep growing and more stories can reach more people. Kindly provide your thoughts and experiences in the comments section. It will aid in my further development. If you liked the video, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Many thanks, and I hope to see you again soon.